Have you ever wondered how those plastic laminate beveled edge countertops get that realistic stone look without the crazy price tag? Well, I'm going to try and blow your mind and show you how to make your own bevel edge from scratch. But why bother making it yourself? Well, for one, you'll eliminate those ugly black seam lines that you see on cheap looking countertops and make it look super realistic for a fraction of the price. And two, making it yourself means you can make your own edging on demand, avoid having to order it in, meaning you'll never run yourself short, especially when you have a time sensitive project and you make a whoops. Which means three, more money for you, because once you know this trick, you can make and sell countertops for less cost for you. So stick around, because I'll walk you through the steps, tricks, and tools you'll need. Step 1. All plastic laminates come in sheets, the most common being 4x8 and 5x12. What I like to do is pre-plan the best way and location of where to cut my countertops out of the sheet so that I know what's left for me to make my edging. Sometimes it's best to cut the tops out from your laminate first, and other times it's okay to just remove some material from the edge of the sheet for your bevel edge first. I'll leave that up to you to figure out. 2. You will need to figure out how much bevel edge is needed, and cut a piece wide enough for all the pieces that you'll be gluing up, which I'll explain more later how I figured this out. You also need to rip a length of MDF up that is the same width of the plastic laminate chunk that you cut out. I like using 1/2 inch MDF for this, but 5/8 or 3/8 will work fine too. Third step will be to glue the plastic laminate down to the MDF. A roll-on contact cement works fine for this. However, I got a spray-on version. One little detail here is when gluing the sheet down, I like to keep it slightly away from the edge of the MDF for the next step, which is to take it to the table saw and rip some lengths. First, I rip lengths out of the laminate board, 53mm wide. This dimension can vary depending on the thickness of your countertops. My tops will be a finished thickness of 36mm with the laminate glued down. Also, 53mm happens to work for the jig I made for the next step. Step 5 is to now take those lengths you have cut and cut one edge on a 45-degree angle, and there's a couple critical things that you need to be aware of. One of those things is that plastic laminate is very brittle, so special care needs to be taken when cutting this angle to get the cleanest, most precise cut as possible. To do this, you will need an appropriate blade on your table saw, like a triple chip blade or some form of saw blade that will be suited for melamines and laminates. The other critical piece of information is how you cut the angle. Laying your saw over on a 45-degree angle and trying to cut a perfectly clean angle is literally not going to cut it, or at least very well. The best way I found to do this is to make a jig something like this that will hold your piece sturdy with no excess movement and on a 45-degree angle so that the blade is cutting straight down into your laminate, not away from your laminate, which is what causes chipping. The jig also helps to keep your hands and fingers safely away from the blade. With one edge cleanly cut on a 45-degree angle, you will need to cut a second piece that is about 12 to 13mm wide that will be taken out of your piece from the other side of the piece we just beveled. This piece will also need a nice straight cut, as this will be the seam on the bevel edge we are making. I have this figured out that removing a 13mm piece max from this beveled piece will give me enough height for my final milled edging for my 36mm countertop, hence why we cut strips earlier at 53mm. With two pieces cut out from our single piece, that was once 53mm wide, one with a bevel and one straight. Our next step will be to glue our two pieces together to create the bevel. The way I found best to do this is to first lay the two pieces out flat on the table. I like to take some fiber tape like this and run it down the length of the seam, squeezing them tightly together as I go. You should see that these fit reasonably nice together without any huge gaps, because that could be a problem you will see later. And we're pretty much ready to glue. I just like to take some strips of fiber tape about 6 inches long and have some ready to go on the edge of the table. We will then take our piece and flip it upside down so that the laminate is face down. and just run some glue right in the seam and slightly above to make sure that we have enough glue where we want it. By the way, it's also critical to use a glue like this Titebond 3. This will give us a seam that is waterproof and strong. Over the 20 years I've done this, I've never once seen an issue with water penetrating the seam or have this open up. It's actually surprisingly strong when done right. Final step for the glue up is just to take some of those strips of tape and start wrapping the piece up along the way. I like to have about 1 foot max between the tape wraps. You could go less if you prefer or if you need to. While doing this, it is critical to pay attention to how the piece is fitting at the seam while wrapping things up. You can manipulate the joint backwards or forwards as needed along the way to get things lined up perfectly. That is why I like using this clear fiber tape, as it does allow me to see things a little bit as I snug things up with the tape. And with that done, it's just a waiting game to get the glue set up. Be sure to keep things nice and flat so that you don't end up accidentally gluing a curve into things. A few hours later, the glue has set up enough for me to finish the bevel edge up. Just remove the tape, and on first inspection, things are looking pretty good. Now it's back to the table saw with our decent saw blade. This step will probably require a second hand and a push jig to help safely cut your bevel edge to the appropriate thickness. What's again critical here is that the blade is high enough to cut down on the laminate, preventing chip out. I like a final thickness of 7mm, but it's a little tricky to get a perfect cut, so I opt to oversize it by a couple millimeters and finish the milling in a thickness sander. However, I realize that it's quite possible that most people watching won't have access to a thickness sander, so you could spend a bit of time getting a featherboard set up and a second hand to help cut. However, I have access to a thickness sander, and this is where I like to mill down the final thickness of my bevel edge to 7mm thick. If you are doing this, there is one crucial step that you must do unless you want to destroy your bevel edge, and that's to orient the sharp edge on a slight angle so that it's the leading edge, so to speak, going into the sander. This makes sure that the sanding belt is cutting into the laminate, because if you were to flip this the other way, the sanding belt is going to want to peel the laminate off with the heat and pressure being exerted on it, which can be pretty catastrophic. But if everything goes smooth, there is one last final step. That's to rip your bevel edge to the exact width you need. I know my final countertop thickness again is 36mm, so that's what I cut it to. However, it's better to be slightly oversized in this case than undersized. Honestly, the biggest problem I run into making this edging is that if you're not careful, it'll slice you to ribbons, as it's crazy sharp. With the edging all milled up, you're ready to get all this cut and installed on the laminated countertops. I truly wish everyone had an attention span as big as Lizzo. But that's a big ask. So subscribe and turn on the notification bell for my next video, which will be about how to install this bevel edge on countertops. Surprise, surprise. In the meantime, you should check out some of my other videos. They might be useful or straight up shit. You decide. Thanks for watching.